Hi everyone, my name is Ricardo Costa and welcome to day 4 of our 10 days series on mastering Photoshop. Are you having fun doing this series? I really hope you are. Today we'll be focusing on adjustment layers. Now, what are adjustment layers? Well, they're a powerful tool that allows you to make changes to your images without actually affecting the original image data. That means your changes are completely non-destructive. With adjustment layers, you can easily adjust things like exposure, colors, and light levels, or either specific areas of a photo or the entire image. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the most commonly used adjustment layers and show you just how easy it is to improve your photos with just a couple of layers. Trust me, it's a great tutorial and we're gonna jump right into Photoshop. So let's go ahead and open up our sample image. You can use the link from the description, open the project folder, day 4 adjustment layers, and open up the image 05. If you don't have the files, you just follow the link down below in the description of this video. It's free to download. Alright, so here we are on the adjustment layers. Now there are a few ways to create adjustment layers in Photoshop. You can go to Layer, then down to New Adjustment Layer, and here you'll see a list of all the different adjustment layers you can create. Alternatively, you can go to Window and then go down to Adjustments, and here you'll see all the adjustment little icons. And finally, you can also find all the adjustment by clicking on this little circle. It looks like a moon cookie with a half light and half dark side. And here you'll see all the adjustments, including some fill layers up at the top like solid color, gradient and pattern. To maintain consistency, let's stick to our main menu, which can be found by selecting the layer option and then click on New Adjustment Layer. In this case, we'll be using the Brightness and Contrast adjustment layer, which is a great tool if you're looking for a simple way to adjust the brightness or contrast of your photo. It's worth noting that while this adjustment layer may not be as versatile as other options like curves and levels adjustment layers, it can still be very useful. If you want to quickly adjust the overall brightness and contrast of your photo, this is a great way to do it. You'll notice that there's an auto button that you can click to have Photoshop automatically adjust the brightness and contrast of your photo based on its calculations. If you're happy with the result, you can leave it as it is, but if you want to tweak the settings, you can always hit undo to get back to the original state and then make your adjustments manually. Once you're done, you'll have an adjustment layer that you can turn off and on at any time. This is great because it allows you to see how the adjustments affect your photo without actually changing the original image data. You can also adjust the opacity of the layer to control how much the effect is applied to your photo. And you can use layer masks to apply the effect to specific areas of your image. Alright, let's dive into our next adjustment layer. We'll head over to the layer menu and select New Adjustment Layer and choose Levels. Levels are an incredible powerful tool just like curves. Once we expand our Properties window, we can adjust our black point, which will turn anything to the left of that point into pure black. Similarly, our white point will turn anything to the right of that point into pure white. We can also adjust our midpoint, which affects the central values of our image and can make them either lighter or darker. For instance, I can add more definition to my sky using levels and a layer mask. I'll darken my central areas a bit, then use Ctrl or Command I to invert my layer mask, making it invisible. If I use my brush tool and paint it with white, I can bring back some of the sky detail while leaving everything else untouched. If there's any area I don't want to be visible, I'll just paint black on my layer mask. Now let's talk about curves, which is another adjustment layer we can use to edit our image. We'll head over to the Layers menu again, select New Adjustment Layer and choose Curves. Curves and levels are very similar, but they offer two different ways of editing the same information. I can adjust my black and white points as well as my midpoint to fine-tune my image. So I can take my black point and make it brighter, or if I drag it to the right, I can make it darker. The same applies for the white point. I can take it and make it brighter or a little bit darker. I can even edit different colored channels such as red, green and blue. In this case, I want to work on my sky again, so I'll add some blue to it by adjusting the blue channel. I'll invert my layer, mask again using Ctrl or Command I, then paint in white using my brush tool to add the blue to my sky. I can easily switch back to my blue channel at any time and make further adjustments to my liking. Just click here the icon and select the blue and adjust it again. Okay, let's see exposure now. We're gonna dive into the layers and go down to create a new adjustment layer for exposure. Now, basically exposure lets you adjust exposure levels with 3 sliders: exposure, offset and gamma. Exposure will adjust only the highlights of the image. Offset adjusts the dark tones and gamma will adjust the midtones. So if you drag the exposure side to the right, it will lighten the image, while if we drag to the left, it darkens. The offset slider has influence over the dark tones. Sliding it to the right will lighten shadow areas, but you should take care as you'll quickly see that the image can start to look washed out as this is adjusted in this direction. Sliding to the left will darken your shadow areas. The gamma slider has the greatest effect over the midtone range of your image. In this slider, to darken the image, you need to slide it to the right and vice versa to lighten it. Alright, next up we're gonna dive into the layers and go down to create a new adjustment layer for Vibrance. Now, what's great about Vibrance is that it offers both a vibrant and a saturation slider. The vibrant slider increases the duration of your images while avoiding skin tones, making it perfect for photos with people in them. But if you don't have people in your shot, you can use the saturation slider. However, be careful because if you push it too far, your reds and skin tones will start looking unnatural, and we don't want that. So remember, always use the vibrance slider for photos with people in them. Now let's go ahead and crank up that vibrance, and there you go. And of course you can use a layer mask to fine-tune the effect, like I'm doing here to reduce the vibrance on my sky since we have already enhanced its blue tones earlier. So there you have it. By stacking different adjustment layers, you can apply different effects to various parts of your image or your entire photo. Alright, so let's move on to the next step. We're gonna go down to the layer and add a new adjustment layer. Now we're gonna select Hue and Saturation and hit OK. This tool allows us to change colors in our image, and as you can see, it's extremely powerful. But most of the time we don't want to change all the colors in our image. So we need to target a specific color. We'll start by changing from master to blues, and then we'll use the little eyedropper tool to click on our subject's car to change the color. Now we want to adjust the saturation and hue a bit more, so we'll put it a little bit towards the red and magenta side. But you'll notice that it's affecting much more than just our object. So we'll click on our layer mask and hit Ctrl I or Command I to invert the layer mask. Then we'll just paint the adjustment layer on our subject's vehicle with white on our layer mask, making this area visible. White makes things visible on a layer mask, while black makes things invisible. Now let's change the colors of this grass and bushes into the front to be a little bit more vibrant as well. We'll grab another hue and saturation adjustment layer, choose a color with the eyedropper tool, select yellows and change the hue and saturation of that color. It's affecting everything again, but that's okay. We'll just invert our layer mask again and paint it invisible, and in this case I am also going to reduce opacity to 50%. And the best thing about these adjustment layers is that we can turn them off or on at any time and change all these settings. So let's turn them all off and check out the before and after. As we turn each layer back on, you can see each individual change that we've made. And overall, I think it's really looking good. Alright, let's dive into the next step. We're gonna add a new adjustment layer and select color balance. This is where things get really interesting because you can adjust the color tones on your image, shadows, midtones and highlights. For example, if we want to warm up the image, we can shift the midtones towards a little bit of red, magenta and yellow. Our image looks a little bit warmer. Or we can undo, then shift towards blue, magenta and cyan to make it look a little bit more cold. Now we don't want to go overboard with this, so we'll just lower the opacity to about 50% to make it look more natural. So let's keep going down to the list and select black and white from the adjustment layer options. This one is pretty self-explanatory. It turns your image into black and white, but the interesting thing here is that you can adjust the light levels of different colors in your image. For example, you could make the yellows really dark or the cyans really light or dark, giving you a lot of control over the different colors in your black and white image. And as with all the other adjustments, you can adjust the opacity to make the effect more or less intense. So if you want a slightly desaturated image, you can do that by lowering the opacity. I'm actually going to turn this one off for now because I like all the colors on this image, but I just wanted to show you how you can use this adjustment layer. Next up, we have the photo filter adjustment layer. This is a really cool way to quickly add a fun filter to your image. You have a bunch of options to choose from, like warming filters or cooling filters, and you can adjust the intensity of the effect. I think I'm gonna go with a warm filter for this image to give it a nice yellow tint, and I think this image looks pretty cool with this style. Check out the before and after with just a click of a button. Now there are some other fun filters to play with, like a green or a deep red. I actually kind of like the green, so let's turn this on and see how it looks. And as always, I recommend keeping things on the subtle size. Moving on to the channel mixer, this one that I don't use too often because it can be a bit tricky to control. You can choose one of the different color channels and adjust how much of that color you want to shift towards to another color. For example, in this case, we have the red channel selected, so we can play around with shifting the amount of green or blue towards red. There are a lot of possibilities here, but it can be a bit difficult to get the exact effect you want, so give it a try and let me know what you think. Let's turn this off and keep exploring. We're gonna head over to Layer, New Adjustment Layer and scroll down to Color Lookup. This is where the magic happens. You can load different looks or LUTs to create unique color grading effects, from warm and vibrant to dark and moody, and even some retro and vintage styles. Although I prefer to do my own color grading, these LUTs are a fun way to experiment and add some flavor to your images. Moving on, we have Invert. This one is a no-brainer. It simply flips your image to its opposite colors. This can be useful for some creative and graphic purposes. Let's talk about Posterize. This adjustment layer reduces the amount of color layers in your image, giving it a more flat and graphic look. You can increase the levels for more detail or decrease them for a more abstract style. This can be a fun tool to play around with, create some cool designs. Alright, let's turn that off and continue our exploration. Let's check out the threshold. It's similar to levels, but it just works with black and white. Basically, it takes a point and makes everything to the left of that point completely black and everything to the right of that point completely white. This is helpful for graphics and analyzing complex composition. Now let's move on to gradient maps, which are incredibly fun. They're an awesome way to colorize and color tone your entire image. You can select from a variety of gradient maps and see how they can be used to color tone your image in a really interesting way. Just be careful not to use this at a full value. There are a lot of preloaded gradients in Photoshop and you can even make your own. Last but not least, we have Selective Color. This one allows you to adjust specific colors like reds and change the amount of cyan, magenta, yellow and black. This is great for doing subtle adjustments to your colors. It's especially useful for things like skin color, where you may just want to make small adjustments. Alright, so there you have it folks, a rundown of some of the most useful and fun colors adjustments you can make in Photoshop. Remember, these adjustments are not only helpful for correcting color issues, but they're also great to add artistic flair and creativity to your photos and graphics. From simple adjustments like brightness and contrast to more complex techniques like gradient maps and selective color, the possibilities are endless. So get out there and experiment with these adjustments. Try out different combinations and settings and see what kind of amazing results you can facilitate. And as always, thanks for tuning in this free course. Next video we'll take a look at image size, dimensions and crop in detail. So make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Thank you, and I hope to see you in the next video.